Welcome back to Geography Explored. If the truth about Texas is already this wild, imagine what happens when someone just starts making things up. Did you know Texas once tried to buy its panhandle with a 3-cent lottery? That sounds exactly like something Texas would do. It never happened. Texas already has a reputation problem, and by that I mean the real facts about this state are so outrageous, so genuinely difficult to believe, that it has become almost impossible to tell the truth from the tall tale. And today, we are leaning into that problem hard. These are 50 facts about Texas that sound completely, convincingly, 100% real, documented, plausible, the kind of thing you'd find in a coffee table book or a National Geographic sidebar. Not a single one of them is true. Let's find out how far fiction can go when it dresses up in Texas boots. Fact 50. Texas is so large that the state government employs a full-time team of professional cartographers whose only job is to redraw the official state map each year. Why? Because the borders naturally shift due to thermal expansion during summer. Every June, a dedicated department in Austin receives updated survey data and issues a corrected map. In particularly brutal summers, the state can temporarily appear up to 12 square miles larger than its recorded size. False. Completely invented. Borders do not thermally expand. But here's the thing. The real Texas does have shifting geography along its Gulf coastline from actual erosion and sediment deposition, and the Texas General Land Office really does monitor those changes constantly. So the idea of a government body recalibrating the map is just close enough to reality to sting. Fact 49. Beneath the Houston downtown financial district, there is a living underground river. City engineers have installed ornamental viewing windows in the basement levels of several skyscrapers so that office workers can watch the current flowing past during their lunch breaks. The windows are lit from below, and the experience has been described as meditative. None of that is real. But Houston does have a remarkable underground tunnel system stretching for miles beneath its downtown, connecting buildings so that workers can walk across the city without stepping into the brutal summer heat. The fake river is fiction. The underground city is not. Fact 48. Texas law requires that all ranch fences over 1 mile in length must be painted in alternating red and white to help migratory birds navigate safely across the state. The law was passed in the 1960s. Failure to comply results in an annual fine. Every word of that sounds documented. It isn't. Fact 47. The Texas Panhandle was originally purchased separately from the rest of the state in 1850 using money raised by a public lottery. Tickets were sold across the former republic's territory for 3 cents each. The grand prize was a working cattle ranch near present-day Amarillo. The lottery raised enough to secure the land from the federal government, and the winner reportedly never claimed the prize. The record of the claim sits in a file in the state archives, still uncollected. Beautifully constructed, completely fictional. The real history of the Panhandle involves boundary negotiations and land surveys that produced its distinctive rectangular shape. But there was no 3-cent lottery, and there is no uncollected file in the archives. The real history is just less cinematic. Fact 46. San Antonio is home to the world's largest underground salt dome, and the city has built an entire tourist attraction inside it called the Salt Cavern Experience. Visitors descend by elevator 400 feet below the Riverwalk to tour chambers where the salt walls are illuminated in shifting colors. A gift shop sells hand-carved salt sculptures. Tickets are $22 for adults. Made up, all of it, including the ticket price. San Antonio's underground world is real in other ways, with genuine caves and aquifer systems nearby, and the Riverwalk itself sits an entire level below the city streets, which perhaps explains why a fictional underground attraction sounds so easy to believe. Fact 45. Texas officially recognizes 2 time zones, but there is also a third informal zone known as ranch time, observed in rural West Texas and set exactly 30 minutes behind mountain time. Ranch time has no legal standing but is acknowledged in county ordinances across 6 West Texas counties. Local businesses often post both the official time and ranch time on their signs. False. But the setup is built on something real. Texas genuinely does span 2 time zones. El Paso operates on Mountain Time while the rest of the state runs on Central. The gap is real, the isolation of West Texas is real, and the idea of a vast, half-empty region operating by its own clock feels just plausible enough. But ranch time is not a thing. You can stop looking for it. Fact 44. The Rio Grande contains naturally occurring trace amounts of a mineral compound that gives the river a faint purple tint at certain times of year, visible from elevated viewpoints along Big Bend National Park. The phenomenon is most pronounced during late October and peaks around the winter solstice. Scientists from the University of Texas have been documenting it since 2004. The Rio Grande does not turn purple. The river's color varies with sediment, rainfall, and light conditions. But there is no mineralogical purple tint and no UT research program studying one. The real Rio Grande, carving the walls of Santa Elena Canyon and forming the entire southern border of Texas with Mexico, is one of the most dramatic rivers on the continent. It just stays the color it is. Fact 43. The first Ferris wheel in North America was built in Galveston, Texas in 1889, 2 years before George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. unveiled his design at the Chicago World's Fair. The original Galveston wheel was a wooden structure 40 feet tall, built as part of a beachfront entertainment district. It was destroyed in the Great Hurricane of 1900, which is why the historical record is so thin. That last sentence is doing a lot of heavy lifting, isn't it? Convenient disaster, missing records. This is fictional history built to be unfalsifiable. Galveston really was one of the most sophisticated cities in America in the late 19th century. It really was devastated by the deadliest natural disaster in American history. But the Ferris wheel was not invented there. Fact 42. Texas has more ghost towns than any other U.S. state, and the state government maintains an official registry of abandoned settlements with over 14,000 separate entries. Each ghost town is assigned a classification level from 1 to 6. Level 6 means completely erased from the landscape. The registry is updated every year. Here's the thing about this one. The premise is real. Texas probably does have more ghost towns than any other state given its oil booms, its frontier settlement patterns, and its sheer size. And the Texas Historical Commission is a real institution. But the 14,000 entry registry with numerical classification levels is invented. The real number is genuinely high, just not that high and not organized that way. Fact 41. Dallas has a city ordinance prohibiting the public display of an empty bird cage within city limits unless it is accompanied by a written explanation of the bird's whereabouts. The law dates to 1931 and was originally designed to prevent street vendors from implying they sold live birds when they did not. No such law exists, but it has the exact texture of a real early 20th century municipal ordinance passed in response to a specific commercial abuse that seems almost too petty to invent. That specificity is the tell and also the trap. Fact 40. Texas is the only U.S. state that has an official state color. The color, designated by the state legislature in 1989, is a specific shade of blue derived from the field of the Texas flag and formerly known as Lone Star Blue. Paint manufacturers in Texas are required to include the Lone Star Blue swatch in any interior paint display sold within state borders. Texas has an official state plant, an official state dish, an official state fiber, and more official designations than most people would believe. But there is no official state color, and there is no legislative paint swatch requirement. Invented, though barely more absurd than some of the real ones. Fact 39. The King Ranch in South Texas operates its own internal postal service with a fleet of vehicles delivering mail and packages between the ranch's various divisions 7 days a week. The service has operated continuously since 1903 and is officially recognized by the U.S. Postal Service as a contracted rural carrier zone, one of only 3 privately operated postal zones in the country. False. But consider what's true. The King Ranch is larger than the entire state of Rhode Island. It has its own internal roads, its own veterinary staff, its own cattle genetics program. The idea that it also runs its own postal service feels like a natural extension of a place that already functions more like a small country than a ranch. It doesn't, but it could have. Fact 38. Any building in Texas taller than 15 stories must include a rooftop weather vane oriented to face directly south as a tribute to the prevailing winds that historically guided cattle drives northward. The law has never been enforced, but has also never been repealed. A never enforced, never repealed quirk of the legal code. That framing alone is genius because Texas's real legal archive does contain genuinely obsolete statutes that have never been formally removed. It's the right structure for a fake law, but the southward weather vane requirement isn't in there. Fact 37. The Guadalupe Mountains contain a naturally pressurized underground chamber that produces a low audible hum, most clearly heard during atmospheric pressure changes in late autumn. Geologists from Texas Tech University have been studying it since the 1990s. They believe the sound is generated by air moving through a network of narrow fractures in the ancient limestone reef formation. Made up. Though the Guadalupe Mountains are genuinely extraordinary, the remnant of a Permian reef that once sat at the bottom of a shallow sea, and West Texas does have a documented phenomenon of singing sand dunes that produce sound when conditions are right. The hum is fictional. The mountains are spectacularly real. Fact 36. Amarillo is the windiest city in the United States, with an average annual wind speed of 19.4 miles per hour, measured over a continuous 70-year period. The City Council has responded by installing wind-powered generators on every streetlight in the downtown district, making Amarillo the first American city to power its entire street lighting grid from wind energy alone. Here's where it gets interesting. Amarillo genuinely is one of the windiest cities in America. Texas genuinely is the largest wind energy producer in the country by a substantial margin. The wind story is real. The specific windiest city ranking and the downtown streetlight grid are not. If you've believed at least 3 of these so far, you're not alone. Fact 35. The Texas State Capitol building sits on a deliberate incline engineered during construction in the 1880s so that rainwater would naturally flow away from the foundation at a calculated rate, preventing any accumulation within 50 feet of the structure. The original engineering specifications describe this as the hydrolytic protection gradient. The hydrolytic protection gradient is not a real engineering term. The incline is not documented in the construction records. What is real is that the Texas State Capitol stands taller than the United States Capitol in Washington, constructed from a distinctive pink granite quarried near Marble Falls. The real building is strange and impressive enough without a fictional drainage system. Fact 34. The town of Marfa, Texas, generates more lightning strikes per square mile than any other location in the contiguous United States, averaging 347 strikes per square mile annually. Scientists believe the unique convergence of desert heat, elevated terrain, and moisture from the Gulf creates a perfect atmospheric strike zone directly above the town. Not true. Marfa is a genuinely fascinating place in the high desert of West Texas, known internationally for the unexplained Marfa lights, glowing orbs seen hovering in the desert that have never been conclusively explained. That alone is strange enough. The lightning capital claim is invented. Fact 33. Texas has its own species of wild horse found only in the eastern river valleys of the state. The Texas Hill horse is a compact breed with distinctive striped markings on its legs, descended from Spanish expedition horses that interbred with native stock over several centuries. The population is estimated at approximately 1,200 individuals and is protected under state wildlife law. Every detail, the name, the stripe markings, the 1,200 individuals, the protected status, all of it invented. Wild horses do exist in Texas, and the history of Spanish horses in the region is real and significant. But there is no recognized Texas hill horse, no stripes, no protected herd. Fact 32. The city of Austin has a formally designated city council seat reserved for the local creative community, elected separately from ward-based elections. The seat, established in 1978, is called the Arts Constituency position, elected by registered voters within an officially mapped arts district boundary. No such seat exists. Austin is genuinely famous for its creative culture and does have robust programs supporting the arts. But fictional government structures dressed in the plausible clothing of Austin's real reputation are still fictional. Fact 31. Padre Island National Seashore contains a stretch of beach where the sand is composed almost entirely of ground fossilized shell material from a species of clam that went extinct approximately 12,000 years ago. Locals and marine biologists call it the extinction shore. The sand there is measurably finer than any other beach sand on the Gulf Coast. False. Padre Island is the longest undeveloped barrier island in the world, and its geology is genuinely interesting. But the extinction shore is not a documented location, and the extinct 12,000-year-old clam narrative is invented. The real island is home to active sea turtle nesting programs and some of the most remote beach in the continental United States. Fact 30. Texas is the only U.S. state that grows all 5 major varieties of commercially significant cotton within its borders. A law passed in 1923 requires that all cotton sold at state-licensed exchanges must be tagged with the specific variety name and the county of origin. This tagging system has been adopted by 7 other states as a model. Texas is genuinely the largest cotton-producing state in the United States. That part is true. The 5-variety law from 1923 and the 7-state adoption model are not. But the real cotton industry in Texas is so extensive that a detailed regulatory framework like this feels like it should exist somewhere. Fact 29. The Llano Estacado, the vast flat tableland of the Texas Panhandle, has not experienced a single measurable earthquake in recorded history, a span of over 200 years of seismic observation. Geologists consider it one of only 6 geological zones in the contiguous United States with a recorded seismic history of absolute 0. The Llano Estacado is real and genuinely one of the most extraordinary flat landforms in North America. Its flatness approaches surreal. But the 0 seismic claim is invented, and there is no official classification of 6 0 seismic zones by U.S. geologists. Texas has actually experienced increased seismic activity in recent years in areas near oil extraction operations. Fact 28. Texas has more public libraries per capita than any other U.S. state, a distinction it has held continuously since 1952. Texas residents live an average of just 4.2 miles from their nearest public library branch, the shortest average distance of any state in the nation. Every word of that sounds documented. It isn't. Texas has a significant public library system, but the per capita leadership claim and the 4.2-mile average are invented statistics. Library access in Texas, as in most large states, is excellent in cities and uneven in rural areas. Fact 27. The Texas coast receives more sea glass per mile of shoreline than any other Gulf Coast state, due to currents that funnel debris from Caribbean shipping lanes directly toward the upper Gulf beaches. Collectors travel to Galveston and Crystal Beach, specifically in January and February, when deposition is statistically highest. Sea glass collecting is a real hobby. Gulf currents do bring material northward. The statistical leadership claim and the January-February peak deposition window are invented. But the construction is tight, isn't it? Just specific enough to feel like it came from a study. Fact 26. The University of Texas at Austin operates the largest university-owned cattle herd in the United States as part of its agricultural research program. The herd, maintained on a 20,000-acre facility near Uvalde, numbers approximately 8,000 head. False. The University of Texas has agricultural connections and research programs. Texas A&M is the genuinely legendary agricultural research institution in the state. But the UT Austin cattle empire described here, 8,000 head on 20,000 acres, is fiction. Fact 25. In 1973, a severe drought in West Texas was broken by a privately funded cloud seeding operation that became the first weather modification program in American history to demonstrably succeed in generating measurable precipitation over a target area, 6 inches of rain over 3 days. The ranching consortium behind it received a federal commendation. This one is particularly well constructed because cloud seeding is a real technology with a genuine history in Texas. Weather modification programs have operated in the state for decades, but the specific 1973 event, the first in America claim, the 6-inch figure, and the federal commendation are invented. Fact 24. The Texas-Mexico border stretches for 1,254 miles and contains 11 official international crossing points, but also includes 37 informal crossing locations recognized under a 1944 binational water-sharing agreement, allowing residents of border communities to cross the Rio Grande using traditional ferries operating under local permit. The 1944 water treaty between the U.S. and Mexico is real. Its provisions do not include informal crossing recognition or permitted traditional ferries. That detail is invented and appended to a real document in a way designed to slip past your skepticism. If you've believed at least 5 of these so far, that's not because you're gullible. It's because they're built out of real pieces. Fact 23. The town of Terlingua, best known today for its annual chili cook-off, was once the largest producer of cinnabar in the Western Hemisphere. At its peak in 1917, the mines employed over 3,000 workers and produced enough mercury to supply the United States military's demand for the following 6 years. Here is where the line gets genuinely blurry. Terlingua really was a mercury mining town. The Chisos Mining Company really did operate there. Cinnabar really was extracted in the Big Bend region, but the Western Hemisphere's largest producer claim and the 6-year military supply figure are inflated and invented. The real history is interesting enough. This version just felt like it needed a bigger number. Fact 22. Texas has a state constitutional provision that prohibits any municipality from restricting the keeping of livestock within city limits if the municipality's population was below 10,000 at the time of its original incorporation. Dozens of Texas cities that have since grown into substantial communities technically cannot prevent residents from keeping horses, cattle, or pigs on residential lots. Texas does have genuinely complex tensions between rural land use traditions and expanding urban ordinances. Real legal disputes over livestock in growing communities do exist. The specific constitutional provision described here does not. Fact 21. Barton Springs Pool in Austin maintains its famous 68-degree water temperature, not entirely due to the Edwards Aquifer, but partly because of a thermal inversion layer in the limestone bedrock that reflects geothermal heat away from the spring. Hydrologists call it the thermal shield. It is unique to the Edwards Plateau. Barton Springs is completely real. The consistent temperature is real, and it genuinely comes from the Edwards Aquifer, maintaining its deep earth temperature as it surfaces. The thermal shield and the thermal inversion layer are invented terminology. The real explanation is fascinating enough that you don't need to improve it. Fact 20. The town of Castroville, Texas, founded in 1844 by Alsatian immigrants, still conducts all official city council meetings in a mixture of English and Alsatian German as a condition of its original municipal charter. The bilingual requirement has never been formally repealed. The charter also requires that at least one council member at all times must be a certified speaker of Alsatian. Castroville is real. The Alsatian immigrant founding is real. It is even nicknamed the Little Alsace of Texas, and it genuinely retains cultural markers of its European heritage. The bilingual meeting requirement and the certified Alsatian speaker clause are invented, but for about 4 seconds while reading that, you probably believed it. Fact 19. The Rio Grande has reversed its flow direction at least 3 times in documented geological history, most recently approximately 8,000 years ago, when tectonic activity along the Trans-Pecos Fault Zone temporarily rerouted the river's headwaters, causing water to move from south to north through the Big Bend Basin for an estimated 600 years. Rivers do change course over geological time. The Rio Grande's history is genuinely complex. The Trans-Pecos region does sit in an active geological zone, but the 3 reversals, the 8,000-year date, the 600-year northward flow period, those specific numbers are invented and dressed in the language of settled geology. Fact 18. Texas has more named mountain ranges than any other state in the contiguous United States, with 47 officially designated ranges recorded in the U.S. Board on Geographic Names database. Most are in the Trans-Pecos region, and many have peaks that qualify as ultra-prominent summits by international mountaineering standards. Texas does have a genuinely surprising number of mountain ranges in its western region. The Davis Mountains, the Guadalupe Mountains, the Chisos Mountains, and others are real and dramatic. The count of 47 officially designated ranges and the ultra-prominence claim for many of their peaks are invented. Fact 17. Beneath Lake Travis, the largest reservoir in the Highland Lakes chain, archaeologists have documented the submerged remains of a pre-Columbian settlement occupied by approximately 2,000 people between 600 and 900 CE. Divers have confirmed the presence of stone foundations, middens, and the footings of a large communal structure, all inundated when Mansfield Dam was completed in 1941. There are genuinely submerged landscapes beneath Texas reservoirs because hundreds of dams were built on previously occupied river valleys. Some do have documented archaeological remains, but the specific Lake Travis settlement with a population of 2,000 and the detailed list of submerged features are invented. Fact 16. The Texas Declaration of Independence, signed in 1836, was written on paper manufactured at the only paper mill west of the Mississippi River at the time, a small operation near San Felipe de Austin. The paper had a distinctive blue fiber woven into the stock. Collectors and historians have used this characteristic to authenticate documents from the Republic of Texas era. False. The documents from Texas's independence in 1836 are genuine artifacts of enormous historical significance. The paper mill story, the blue fiber, and the authentication methodology are invented details designed to sound like the kind of thing you'd find in a footnote. Fact 15. Texas has the highest concentration of private airstrips per square mile of any U.S. state, with 1 private airstrip for every 48 square miles of rural territory. This density reflects the agricultural demands of large ranch operations and the private aviation culture that developed during the post-war years of the late 1940s and 1950s. Texas does have a remarkable number of private airstrips. Its ranch culture and vast distances make private aviation genuinely practical in ways that don't apply in smaller states. But the 1 per 48 square miles density figure and the framing of this as a documented national record are invented. Fact 14. The Permian Basin sits above a naturally occurring underground brine lake approximately 3 times the size of Lake Superior. This brine formation acts as a natural pressure seal that has preserved the Permian Basin's oil deposits in an unusually concentrated form for hundreds of millions of years. An underground brine lake 3 times the size of Lake Superior. That is a fact-sized fiction, and a good one. The Permian Basin really does produce roughly 40% of all U.S. oil. Its geology really is complex. But the brine lake is not down there. Fact 13. The Texas Hill Country produces more honey per acre of productive land than any other region in the United States, driven by the extraordinary diversity of native flowering plants in the Edwards Plateau ecosystem. The region's honey is formally designated as a geographic indication product by the Texas Department of Agriculture, similar to GI designations used for European wines and cheeses. Texas is a significant honey-producing state, and the Hill Country's wildflower diversity is genuinely remarkable, bluebonnets and native species supporting real bee populations. But the per-acre national leadership claim and the geographic indication designation are invented. Fact 12. The city of Laredo holds the distinction of having been governed under 7 different national flags in its history, 1 more than any other city in Texas and 2 more than San Antonio, which is often cited for its 6 flags heritage. The 7th flag was the short-lived Republic of the Rio Grande, which claimed Laredo as its capital in 1840 before being suppressed by Mexican forces after 224 days. The Republic of the Rio Grande is genuinely real. It was a brief revolutionary movement in northern Mexico in 1840, and Laredo was genuinely associated with it. This fact is constructed as a correction of the well-known Six Flags narrative, and it is doing so cleverly. But the 7-flag framing and the comparison to San Antonio are invented as presented here. Fact 11. Texas has a documented tradition of competitive weather forecasting that predates the National Weather Service by nearly 40 years. Panhandle ranchers developed a set of locally observed meteorological indicators during the 1840s that have since been quantified by meteorological historians at an accuracy rate of around 73%. The idea of frontier ranchers developing practical weather knowledge from observed conditions is real and historically plausible. The 73% accuracy rate quantified by meteorological historians is not. That specific number is the tell. Real folk knowledge doesn't come with quantified accuracy metrics from academic historians. Fact 10. The Texas state government maintains a permanent diplomatic liaison office in Mexico City under an arrangement that has existed since 1850, making Texas the only U.S. state with a formally recognized bilateral diplomatic relationship with a foreign government. The office handles agricultural trade disputes, water-sharing negotiations, and cultural exchange agreements independently of the federal State Department. States do not conduct independent foreign policy under the U.S. Constitution. Texas has extensive cross-border relationships with Mexico and does operate programs related to trade and border affairs. But a permanently recognized bilateral diplomatic office in Mexico City, operating independently of the State Department, is not real and could not legally exist. Fact 9. The San Jacinto Monument near Houston contains a time capsule sealed within its foundation stone that includes a complete handwritten copy of the Texas Constitution, a sample of soil from each of Texas's 254 counties, and a live wax cylinder recording of battlefield cannon fire made in 1898. It is scheduled to be opened in 2036 on the 200th anniversary of the battle. The San Jacinto Monument is genuinely one of the tallest stone columns in the world, taller than the Washington Monument, commemorating Texas's victory at the Battle of San Jacinto in 1836. There may be a real-time capsule in the monument. The specific contents described here, the county soil samples, the wax cylinder recording, those are invented. Fact 8. Texas has more active volunteer fire departments than any other U.S. state. And the state legislature passed a law in 2003 requiring every unincorporated community with more than 50 permanent residents to establish and maintain a volunteer fire department with at least 12 certified members. Communities that fail to comply within 5 years are ineligible for state emergency management funding. Texas does rely heavily on volunteer fire departments given its vast rural territory. That much is true. The 50-resident threshold, the 12-member requirement, the 5-year compliance window, and the funding ineligibility penalty are invented legislative details. But they are invented in exactly the way real Texas legislation tends to read. Fact 7. The Big Bend region contains the largest intact dark sky reserve in the Western Hemisphere, covering approximately 9,000 square miles of designated protected darkness. The reserve is jointly administered by Big Bend National Park, Big Bend Ranch State Park, and the International Dark Sky Association, and requires annual light pollution measurements at over 200 monitoring stations. The dark skies of West Texas are genuinely among the darkest in the United States, and Big Bend does hold real dark sky designations. But the 9,000 square mile Western Hemisphere record and the 200 station monitoring network are invented specifics layered onto a real foundation. Fact 6. Texas has a documented geological feature called the Texas Gravity Anomaly, a region in the Trans-Pecos where gravitational pull is measurably lower than the global average, producing a gravitational deficit of approximately 0.3% large enough to affect GPS satellite calibration in the region. Scientists believe it is caused by an ancient subducted ocean plate beneath the Trans-Pecos crust that is less dense than the surrounding mantle. Gravity anomalies are a real field of geophysical study. Texas does have interesting subsurface geology, but the Texas Gravity Anomaly as a named and documented phenomenon with a measurable GPS calibration effect is invented and named with exactly the confidence of something real. Fact 5. The first commercial radio broadcast in the United States originated from San Antonio, Texas in 1919, predating KDKA Pittsburgh by over a year. A station operated by a German immigrant electrical engineer named Heinrich Brandt transmitted an experimental broadcast of weather information and a musical performance across 40 miles. The station was shut down by federal authorities before it could be officially licensed, and its records were largely destroyed in a courthouse fire in 1921, which is why Pittsburgh's claim to the first broadcast has gone unchallenged. That last sentence, "That is the tell." It is explaining away the absence of evidence before you've even thought to ask for it. KDKA Pittsburgh's claim is real and documented, though genuinely contested in some academic circles. But Heinrich Brandt and the convenient courthouse fire are fictional. The fire exists only to explain why you cannot find the evidence. Fact 4. The Edwards Aquifer, which supplies drinking water to over 2 million Texans, is measurably saltier on its western edge than on its eastern edge. This salinity gradient creates a natural density barrier that hydrologists call the freshwater curtain. If the curtain were to collapse due to excessive pumping, it could render the entire western segment of the aquifer undrinkable within approximately 3 to 5 years. The Edwards Aquifer is real, vital, and genuinely under pressure from population growth and drought. The aquifer does have salinity variations across its extent. But the freshwater curtain is not a real hydrological term. The specific collapse timeline is invented, and the 3 to 5 year potability window is fiction designed to sound like an environmental warning you should be alarmed by. Fact 3. Texas A&M University maintains a herd of exactly 1,001 longhorn cattle on its main campus as part of a continuous breeding and genetics program operating since 1876. The herd is one of the 3 founding populations of the modern Texas Longhorn breed, and its genetics records represent the longest uninterrupted livestock genetics archive in the Western Hemisphere. 1,001. Not 1,000, not 1,200, 1,001. That specificity is deliberate. Specific numbers feel like data. Data feels like documentation. None of this is documented because none of it happened. Fact 2. The Texas coastline, measured using the same methodology applied to Norway's famously complex coastline, would extend to approximately 38,000 miles. This would make Texas's coast the 4th longest of any U.S. state, trailing only Alaska, Florida, and Louisiana. Here is a fact built on something genuinely true. Coastline measurements are deeply dependent on methodology. The fractal nature of a coastline means that smaller units of measurement produce dramatically larger totals. Texas's real coastline is approximately 367 miles in a straight line, but includes over 3,000 miles when bays, inlets, and tidal areas are counted. The 38,000-mile figure exploits a real mathematical phenomenon to arrive at a fictional result. Fact 1, and here we are. Texas was technically a nation for 9 years between 1836 and 1845. But according to a legal opinion issued by the Texas Attorney General's office in 1987, the terms of Texas's annexation into the United States were so broadly written that Texas retains, to this day, the legal right to subdivide itself into as many as 5 separate states without requiring approval from Congress, as long as each resulting state maintains a population above 500,000. The opinion, while non-binding, has never been formally challenged in federal court and therefore technically remains valid. This one is the most dangerous of the 50, because the core idea, Texas's ability to subdivide into up to 5 states, is rooted in real constitutional lore. The joint resolution of annexation in 1845 really did include language about potential division into additional states. Legal scholars debate its scope and meaning to this day, but the 1987 Attorney General's opinion, the 500,000-person threshold, and the never-challenged federal court framing are entirely invented. It is built on a real foundation, shaped into a fictional structure, and delivered with the calm confidence of settled law. And that is 50. 50 facts about Texas that sounded real, felt sourced, carried the weight of geography and law and history, and were completely false. Every single one of them. What makes Texas such fertile ground for this kind of experiment is exactly what makes it remarkable in reality. When a state is genuinely larger than France, genuinely home to the world's largest bat colony, genuinely the site of the deadliest natural disaster in American history, when a single ranch is bigger than Rhode Island and the state spans 2 time zones, fiction barely has to try. It just has to wear the right clothes. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to Geography Explored and let us know in the comments which one had you the longest. If you watched my last Texas video, every fact was real. Today, none of them were. The difference? Confidence. We'll see you on the next one.